Welcome to Getting Ghosted. This is an Intuitive Soul Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Horner. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today I have a fun little episode. We're going to do some questions that have to do about with how the other side communicates and maybe in ways that we might not always recognize. So I hope that this is a fun one for you guys. I know I've been taking some time off to make sure that I could really give the podcast the time and energy that it needs. And I've been thinking about doing it in seasons from now on so that I have a little bit more of my time and energy back. I'm also working on some fun things behind the scenes. I'm not ready to announce them all yet, but I have been really thinking about what really feels right and feels good for me. And I think I'm getting closer and closer to being ready to announce what it is, which is something akin to like a snail mail club slash spirit zine, like a magazine, mini magazine type of thing. So I really want to share more of your stories in there and feature more of your communication with your loved ones, the signs you're getting from your loved ones. I just love, one of the things I love most is hearing other people's stories. And when I was young, one of my favorite things to do was just run home and check my mailbox and find my magazines and catalogs and all that fun stuff. But I used to love to read like Sports Illustrated for kids and Teen Vogue and 17 magazine, all those fun things. And I would just like, grab my snacks and grab my like crispy Coca-Cola, and I would just settle in my room and read all of my magazines all in one sitting. And I just looked forward to it so much. And I feel like we are just so zapped from being online so much, but like I really feel like a lot of people miss getting to hold something really beautiful and really well made in their hands. To, a lot of people love to actually hold or flip through a good book. And so, so I've been wanting to create something that's kind of like a spiritual snail mail or magazine type of thing. Now, if it's a magazine, I can't promise that it's going to be huge right off the bat, I want to make sure it's very cost efficient as well. But this is what's been really calling to me. So I've been thinking about adding your stories and stories from my own readings and experiences, and stories that my friends have shared, all of that fun stuff about communication with the other side, spirit interventions, intuition, and how it saved the day. All of the sorts of like really cool experiences that I've showed you, that there's more out there than what we think, that life goes on beyond death, and that we just have more spiritual support and, support from higher beings as well than we realize. I feel like that's the most powerful part about this work, is just getting to share our stories and hear each other's stories. And also, I think it can also be very helpful for people who are grieving and looking for support after a loved one dies and moves into their non-physical. So that's what I've been wanting to create. I was thinking maybe I'll do some tips and tricks each month, and maybe interviews with people, things like that. So if you're interested, just keep an eye out for that, because I will be creating a waitlist, almost like a pre-sale or waitlist for people to get on board. It will really help me know how much, because I'm going to have to set aside for materials and budget time and energy, and obviously for materials for this. And I want it to be really well done. I don't like to put things out there if they're not really well done. So I know not everything will be perfect, but something like this, where it's like something that tangible that you hold in your hands, feels like I really want to have it well put together for you guys. I want to make sure that it really serves a good purpose too, and that it's actually really like something you guys will enjoy reading and getting. So if you guys like do a pre-sale with me, and I will set that up soon and let you guys know when I have it. But once I start to get that rolling, it'll help me so much if you guys sign up for it. If you like truly are like excited about it, just because then I can start to budget my time and money for supplies and stuff like that. And really make sure that I have all of that kind of like really planned well and buttoned up. It's really interesting because I'm very much like a psychic and a medium, but in my past I worked in marketing, and I did a lot of stuff with social media, but I also did a lot of creative project management and account management and stuff like that, but mostly like project management. So I'm like almost going back to my project management days of having to like schedule out and do like a full like deadline outline, like project management schedule of like, okay, if I'm going to have this ship out on this date and arrive to people by that date, let's back this out. Like where you have to reverse engineer, like when your editing has to be done, when final drafts have to be in, when things have to be submitted to a printer. Then you have to look for like, am I going to print it at home or, work with a printer? Cause then what are their timelines? Like, when do I have to have all the stories in, all of the tips written, everything done and edited? And then when do I have to have it laid out? All of that stuff's been going through my brain. So this is how I can tell, though, as a manifesting generator, that I'm doing something that I actually need to be doing, is because all those steps fall into place more seamlessly. So that's what I'm working on kind of behind the scenes. That's also why I'm taking a little more time away from doing TikTok live and from doing as many TikTok videos. I will still be on there, but I'm just not as often. And I've said this about TikTok live before as well. I do have my private readings open. So I hope that you guys will come and check those out, because I'm only going to be opening those like a couple of times a year, just to make sure that I am really conserving my energy. And right now I do have like sit down readings where you can actually book and get on my calendar to talk for 30 to 45 minutes, depending on what you need. And I have a bunch of different kinds of readings that you can do, from mediumship, where you call in a specific loved one to chat, to asking for advice around your calling and career, to all sorts of different things, like asking your spirit guides about different situations. So I hope that you guys will come and check that out. And then I also have my usual WhatsApp and audio recording readings. So anyhow, let's get to it on this episode. So for this one, we have some really fun listener stories that come from a really specific type of topic, which is recently in October, I did a really fun spirit guide live Q&A for my Patreon group. And so they got to ask some interesting questions for the guides. There was actually a couple questions about using, like, how guides communicate and what's communication and what's not. And then what are their thoughts on using things like tarot and oracle cards and things like that. And it's so funny because I happen to have some really cool stories that had come in via the comment section on some of my TikToks over the last month or two. And so, and also things that people submitted through email. So I wanted to share those because they kind of loop into this like whole communication piece. Now I do have my guides over here. And so we'll start off with a comment that Kat left in the Patreon. And she said, do our guides like or enjoy communicating with us via pendulums, tarot, and other tangible communication objects? So I'm guessing like dowsing rods and Ouija boards, things like that as well. Or are those better served for other energies? I hope that makes sense. And so one thing my guides have always said is, like, it's not that you can't use these things, but when you are using those things, you're going to be very limited in your communication with them. And so they're kind of over here and they're like, we would rather you not rely on those things or use those things when you're first developing. Like, think about them like they might be your step into a first step into using your intuition more or beginning to communicate more, but they're not meant to replace your spiritual communication or your intuition itself. Sometimes we can get clues from the world around us, like from an oracle card or a tarot card or a pendulum. But again, though, if we're using that, that's going to be really limited in how much it can communicate with us or how much they can communicate with us through that thing, right? So the key thing is actually when I teach my courses, I tell people don't use any of your tools, because I often see I see people using them as crutches instead of actually leaning fully into their intuition. When you take those tools away, your ability to communicate with the other side and your intuition is going to get really, really crisp and really, really clear. And that's often how it works. But I can always tell if someone's still using a crutch because the answers that they're getting from their guides will be a lot more limited, not because you're limited or because the guides are limited, but because you need to kind of open your mind more and stop relying on that crutch. It's kind of like they're showing me when a kid is learning to swim and they know how to do it, but they still want to use the kickboard or the little floaty inner tube or noodle, or they want to keep the water wings on, but they already know how. And it's like they're leaning into that thing because they think they can't do it, but they already can. So sometimes they just need to kind of jump in and have a safe person there to land so that, and just in case. So having like a guide or a teacher there or a class to practice with or kind of bounce things off of can be really helpful as well. That's why I always love to teach in groups as well. And I do some individual stuff, but I mostly love to teach people in groups so that you guys can practice together. But a lot of the time, we don't want to be overusing that crutch or overusing that thing because it can actually start to stunt our growth a little bit more, right? So kind of going along with that, there was someone online who mentioned a really unique way that her loved ones are giving her signs. And so again, this is something where it's like, oh, that's cool to have that sign, but we don't want to lean into that as the only means of communication. And it reminded me of something that's coming out, which is Stranger Things, and how in the very first season, Will, or some people have theorized potentially Vecna was using all of the lights in the very beginning, the very early episodes of the show to communicate with Joyce. So FB Dylan on TikTok said, recently I asked my dad to please give me a sign if he could hear me or he was around. And then she said he died in January. That night, the smoke detector in my room beeped 3 times. There was no ongoing chirping like the battery being dead, and there was no smoke. Years ago, I asked a deceased childhood friend to communicate with me. Not long after, my alarm clock started going off when it wasn't set. That happened a couple times one night. So it sounds like for this person, they're one of the ways that that they can get their attention is through their smoke detectors, and specifically like as a really specific means of communication, because for this person that might be like one of the signs that she recognizes. It's not meant to be the only means of communication, just sort of like a little bit of like, hey, I'm here, I'm saying hello, I'm ready to talk or connect when you are, but I'm just letting you know that I'm here. And spirits can absolutely use electricity. They love to use things like flickering lights, twinkle lights, turning TVs on and off, I've heard of, or radios, and using smoke detectors. I even once heard a story that I thought was so cool. And I forget who shared this originally. So I think I read it somewhere. So if you recognize it, feel free to reach out to me and let me know where it's from, because I cannot remember for the life of me. But essentially, there was this couple who were living together, and I believe the father passed away, the woman's father passed away. And in a moment of grief, her radio that had been like, I think his radio had kept turning on. And so she finally unplugged it and had put it away. And then it turned on again, and they realized it was him trying to communicate with her because the radio was no longer plugged in and it was still working. And it was an old radio. It was not a battery powered radio. So I thought that was super cool, just as an example that the other side can certainly use electricity and technology to communicate with us as well. But again, we don't want to use these outside things as crutches. They're just there to be there to help us. And so again, one of the things that I kind of recognize with this is, so when I was first practicing with my guides, I learned this lesson the hard way because I was using my pendulum. And I was using it I had made essentially my own letters and numbers, alphabet, almost like a Ouija board. And so I was using my pendulum with that. And I realized very quickly that yes, the other side can use the pendulum, but it was going to be very slow going, instead of just receiving the messages clairaudiently and trusting what I was hearing or trusting what I was feeling. It made things very slow going. And 2, in addition, when you work with a pendulum, your energy can screw with the pendulum. We do have subconscious reflexes and subconscious movements that we make. So when you're doing something handheld like dowsing rods or a pendulum, yes, you can impact the answers that are coming through from that. So that's something to keep in mind too, just because sometimes it breaks people's faith if they're faith in the other side. If they're oh my gosh, well, I got this answer from the other side and it wasn't true and I used my pendulum, and it's well, try not using your pendulum and see if the answer changes. Now, another fun thing that they can do kind of along the lines of this is they can actually kind of play with physical objects. And we don't talk about this as much just because I think it kind of spooks people a little bit more than it needs to. But a lot of times guides and loved ones on the other side, when they move physical objects, they're called tricksters or negative energies or entities. That's not what's going on. They're not negative energies. They're not tricking you. Oftentimes they're trying to communicate with you, and they're trying to get a good laugh out of you. And so actually earlier, I had seen something on TikTok about a young man who had passed away, who was really well known. And I was not very familiar with him though. I just became aware of like, oh, he's very well known in like a certain region. And immediately I had this beautiful energy coming through. And I was like, oh, he is just radiant. And he had just passed. And right at that moment, as he was talking, he was telling me all of these wonderful things. And he was saying, I am the sun, and now I'm the rain, and I'm the stars in the sky. And like he was just really, really beaming with how beautiful he felt everything was. And right at that moment, I was sitting on my bed and I was feeling him there, and I was almost kind of like feeling how overjoyed he was to the point that I was almost in tears. And my eyes drifted upward into my little kitchen area where my son and I had made one of those paper chains, and it had broken, and there was one piece that had just been kind of hanging there, and me and my ADHD had been like, I'll fix that later. And I had left it there for several days and hadn't touched it, hadn't walked by it. Just it was just hanging there, like, and it just was like not even catching my attention. But for whatever reason, I looked up there and my eyes just gazed at it. And that was the moment that it just floated straight down. Mind you, I had no fans on, no AC on, no heat on. There's no doors open. There's no breeze that could be coming in to knock it down. There's no reason why that fell right at that moment. But he was showing me, see, I can be everywhere all at once. And he made the little paper on the paper chain fall. Which kind of brings me to, they can move around physical objects sometimes, but it takes quite a bit. And it always reminds me of in the show Ghosts, which there's a UK version and a US version. The UK version is my favorite so far. But there's this one character, I think his name is Julian, and he'll like get his little finger out where he's pointing at an object like really hard, like he's trying to scooch it with his finger. And he's like, like using all of his power and all of his energetic might trying to move something, and it'll be like one little scotch of a movement, and they're all like, yay. And so one of my guides, Eric, has said, that's kind of what it's like for a lot of us. Like not all of us can work with the physical senses as well, and not all of us. And he said also a lot of humans don't notice it when we do. And he said, unless they're really like, it really feels like it's a nuisance. So like, the keys get lost, something gets moved, etc., that they don't want moved. And he said, but if we're doing that, it's usually for good reason. So mind your P's and Q's there, ma'am. Yeah, so they can actually like move physical things. But the key thing is we don't want to be waiting for that. So again, with like moving physical things, like, using their energy to move the dowsing rods, using their energy to move, the little thing on the Ouija board, using their energy to move the pendulum. We don't want to be waiting and relying on that because, again, that will make communication slow going. And then also you're having to rely on that outside sense to get that confirmation. And sometimes I would say to like people that I was teaching in class, like, well, what happens on the day that you're sitting on an airplane and you don't have your tarot cards there, you don't have your dowsing rods, or you can't take them out, you don't have your pendulum right there, like, you know what I mean? Could you imagine a pendulum on an airplane? So like, it's like, what if you don't have that tool there? Like you have to know that your consciousness is the tool. You are meant to be the connector. So like that's what being a medium is. You are the tool. You are the artist and the art, and you are, the paint and the painting. You are here to be those things. So what really you would be best served doing is just learning how to connect without those tools first, because then you know that your intuition and your connection works best. And then if you want to use tools, or if you want to use these other things, whether it's auto writing, painting, cards, pendulums, Ouija boards, whatever else, you're able to do that, or electricity or whatever you want to do, you're able to do that in a really grounded way because you're relying on your own senses first, instead of like waiting for to have those tools or to get communication through them in the future. So what do you think of this? Do you use pendulums and cards? I know a lot of people really like to use cards and pendulums, but I find that if you spend time with your intuition and your own connection and develop that first and then go to use those things, it will only grow stronger because you're not using them as like a crutch or in place of it. So I know a lot of people really love their cards, some people, that's how they make their living. So it's definitely not to say not to do that, but usually those people are really strong intuitively in the first place. So they don't, they're not going to use their cards in place of their own intuition. It's meant to be like a complement to it. But I'm curious, like, what have you tried? What are you willing to try? Like, what tools have you tried that worked? What didn't work so well for you? How does your intuition speak to you? And what questions do you have? Feel free to leave them on my Patreon or submit them via the link in my bio in the show notes. All right. Thank you guys.